Stuffer, and welcome to Angus IT, the podcast all about anxiety, depression, and the past. Oh, the past. Yes, childhood. What a mystical time, if you remember your childhood. Mine is a haze of stress, anxiety, playing witch. Well, sorry, that was yesterday. I get the two mixed up all the time. My childhood was, pretty interesting, considering I was anxious and nobody knew. We had no idea anxiety disorders were a thing, let alone bipolar. Who knows? Hard to say if I was fully activated in my bipolar powers as a child. But, I can definitely tell you there were times where my anxiety was just wild, and then I would get really hung up on certain things. And a lot of that came from expanding from my personal bubble, that comfort zone. And what happened to me growing up is that I didn't really push the comfort zone because it was disgusting. I was a kid, and why would I do that? I can just watch television. What was I watching back then? PBS. I watched the shit out of PBS. So one of the few curricular activities I did have was being a Girl Scout. I was a member of the Girl Scouts of America for, oh my gosh, I think almost a decade. I started as a daisy and I made it all the way up through junior, and our troop stopped after middle school. So yeah, if you don't know, the rankings of the Girl Scouts of America, it's not a cult, it's a group, but they do have names for each of their levels. So you start off as Daisy. That's like kindergartners. Your uniform is literally a bib because you are incapable of not being a messy ass 4-year-old. Okay, so you have Daisies. Then you grow up to Brownies. Okay, these are your homies with the brown vests. They're pretty cool. And then you're a brownie up until 5th grade. And then at 5th grade, you get to do a graduation ceremony that involves crossing a bridge while holding a candle. Unfortunately, not at midnight and not wearing cloaks. I was highly disappointed. Regardless, once you cross the bridge, no, you were not dying. You were just turning into a junior. Juniors get to have a mint-colored vest or sash. Most people go for the sash. I thought I had to stick with the vest. You can probably assume the cool girls got the sash and I was lame and I got the vest, and I've regretted it almost every single day when I think about this, which isn't often. I have moved on from my childhood. Anyway, I was in Girl Scouts for a long ass time, and a big thing with Girl Scouts of America is selling cookies. People are obsessed with Girl Scout cookies, and Girl Scouts can sell them, and you can win prizes for how much you earn from the Girl Scouts. Now, it doesn't go directly to you. It goes to your troop, and the main foundation, obviously, the Girl Scouts of America. I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway, mostly you had to sell some shit, and you might not be a salesperson. You might not be a child who wanted to always go up and talk to strange adults in their home. I don't even know how they do it these days. I don't know if they're like, oh yeah, go around to your neighborhood and knock on doors. I don't know if that's a no-no now, but that's what I did. And then you would have a kiosk at a mall, and you'd go to the mall and you try to sell there, or you go outside of a grocery store. So just really big on trying to sell those cookies. So if that didn't come to you naturally, it could be very stressful. Now, you didn't have to do it, but they had prizes, guys. One of the prizes was a stereo. A little boom box, okay? That's some hot shit. There were keychains. There was a hair straightener at one point. It was some good shit if you sold 1,000 boxes of cookies. So totally reasonable. But I was anxious, and I had just, I was still recovering from a camp out where I went over a swinging bridge. I hate swinging bridges. People are always like, it's no big deal. I'm like, this is the only thing keeping us from falling into this ravine, and it's not stable. We are moving back and forth, side to side. You aren't bothered by this? Sorry. Another story for another day. There was a lot of things I went through, but Girl Scout cookie selling was the biggest. And so I moved on with my life. I left that part of me behind. I got older. And then in college, I took a personal essay class. And that's where I learned about creative nonfiction. It's basically what David Sedaris does. You write these stories from your life, and, in some ways you can exaggerate it, whatever, does well for the essence of storytelling. But it is in short, your life. And for that class, I really vibed with it. I'd never written that way before. And it was one of those things where you start talking to other people and you realize, oh, my life was kind of weird. We all had weird life moments, right? So I just was quickly learning like, oh, I had a lot of weird shit. And my lens of how I experienced it was so odd because I had experienced it as a very anxious child who didn't know she was anxious. Needless to say, I ended up having a series of essays that were all about my time in the Girl Scouts. And I tried to keep writing them, but my memory kind of did that thing where it just like was like, I don't have anything left. I kind of forget, blocked it out. I do have those essays still. I'm trying to put them into something at some point, but the muse has gone elsewhere for now. But I wrote an essay called Do-si-dos and Do-si-don'ts. And a do-si-do was one of the cookies from the Girl Scouts of America. And it was about my time selling these Girl Scout cookies in my small Ohio neighborhood. And I wrote that essay and I was like, whatever. Graduate college, major depression. I'm like, I don't even know what the point is of any of this. I finally get on meds, we go through that whole thing, and it's 2018. And I'm like, you know what? Writing is such a huge part of my identity, and I haven't been able to do it in like 3,000 years. I'd like to get back into it. Let me try it again. And so I couldn't write anything new, but I just wanted to reach out to my professor and just say, hey, in general anyway. And then he goes, so funny you just emailed me. I just got this other email from a journal, and they're looking for humorous personal essays. I was like, what? So I went ahead and turned in one of those Girl Scout essays I'd already written. I got submitted, which was wild. And then I won an award. So it was a very, a lot happened in such a short amount of time. And I have this wall in my office that I'm trying to now call the wall of accomplishments, but I used to call it the wall of dead dreams. Because I really did want to keep going with my writing, but my mental health just like shot that down because I was just trying to get through the day, let alone even trying to do anything creative whatsoever. I came to writing with a very unhealthy approach for a very long time, I would say until like the past like year and a half. But even then I've been really afraid to like try again. But I'm getting in the groove. I'm getting in the swing of things. I joined this short story competition that really kind of ignited my love of writing again. And it's okay if I come back to this, not the same writer, but that's for a different episode because what I want to do is I want to read this essay to you. I haven't myself read it in a while. This could be very interesting. We'll see. But I did put this on Instagram a while ago and y'all said, yes, you want to hear it. So without further ado, I will now read to you the award-winning, that's so stupid, the award-winning essay, Do-si-dos and Do-si-don'ts. I became a dealer at the age of 8. It was February in Ohio, a brutal month for the Midwest. People wanted something to keep them warm on the inside, and it had fallen onto my shoulders to help them out. We had the goods. We just needed people to come crawling to us, like they always did each season. My supplier handed me a costume that night. You've got the stuff, she said. You're the best girl I got for this. The other girls chimed in, clapping their hands in agreement. I had the personality. Somewhat outgoing, but shy enough to leave the customer wanting more. Feeling the pressure from my peers, I slipped the costume on over my clothes. Whatever it took for us to make the dough, I was willing to do for the team. That's how I became a Thin Mint for 3 hours outside of a Kroger. There were a lot of incentives to sell Girl Scout cookies. If you sold 20 boxes, you could win a special pewter paperweight statue. I own 6 that are currently sitting on my trophy shelf back home, covered in a thick layer of dust. If you sold 50 or 100, you got cooler prizes like beach towels or giant stuffed animals. It was my first true lesson in capitalism, and like the true goddamn American child that I was, I valiantly marched forward to make those cookie sales. There was just one problem. Selling cookies involved door-to-door sales, and I was deathly afraid of humans. I was still getting over the idea that reflections weren't their own people who were trying to crawl through the mirror to kill me. It was only natural then that I felt completely unprepared for the task ahead of me. In a sense, I was lucky. My neighborhood had suffered a dry spell of Girl Scouts and was practically dying to have a child come knock on their door to offer them goods. In fact, my neighborhood lacked younger kids in general, which was great when it came time for Halloween. Fed-up adults would dump entire bowls of candy into my bag saying, "You're the first and probably only trick-or-treater I'll get tonight. Here, take it all." I'm glad that I had control over my diet. Otherwise, I would have gained a lot of weight from my copious amounts of candy. As it turned out, I did not have any control over my diet, and I gained a lot of weight. While sad in its own way, I was glad to have skipped over the next few scarring years of wearing my brother's hand-me-downs since their things no longer fit me. Since walking around our neighborhood in the dead of winter was not at the top of my parents' to-do list, my dad was the one who got stuck with dragging me around, forcing me to get over my fear of human beings. What do I say again? I said at our 5th stop. You smile and say, "Would you like to buy some Girl Scout cookies?" my dad said, laying his hand on my shoulder. Okay. As we stood before the door, I paused. Want to ring the doorbell? My dad said. No, not really, I said. Do you want to go over your script again? And he'd happily repeat the single question I had to ask, helping me nail down the intonation, facial expression, and blocking within the scene. I wanted to make sure that everything was perfect so that I'd get the sale, almost to the point that it drove me insane. Of course, no one knew at that point that my acute obsession with perfecting this one line stemmed from an actual anxiety disorder. I think we all just thought I was going to be that kid. Granted, my eldest brother would grow up to be a guy who dressed up as a Civil War character for his livelihood, and my other brother would live at home writing crude humor books. Unfortunately, I did not have this hindsight available to me at that time, and I was quite sure I was morphing into the family freak. Would you like to buy some Girl Scout cookies? I said, gesturing my arms to the brochure in my hand like some doped-out toddler in a pageant. The man stood behind a screen door, his tank top covered in grease stains. He paused for a moment, staring blankly at me. What kind you got? I smiled so I wouldn't have to speak yet. We hadn't rehearsed this far. What should I say? What cookie should I explain first? Not the do-si-do. No one understood what was going on with that cookie, and I didn't want him to think that I thought he was stupid for not knowing what a Thin Mint was. Thin Mints were practically the founding fathers of Girl Scout cookies. Now, the tag-along could be an interesting choice, a peanut butter patty coated in a chocolate byproduct. Ooh, but what if he hated peanut butter? What if he had allergies? What if I killed him? What if he hated me? Was he a serial killer? Was I about to die? I was frozen in my smile, showing off my insanely crooked teeth. He smiled back, clearly pained that this awkward coconut-head girl had shown up on his doorstep. Here, how about you hand him the brochure, my dad said. Still smiling, my cheeks were starting to cramp, I lifted the brochure to the screen door. The man reluctantly cracked it open and took the brochure from me. He said. How much are they per box? $3.50, I managed to say. That's 25 cents higher than last time, he grumbled. My stomach twisted with guilt, as though it were my fault that the Girl Scouts had jacked up their prices. I tried to calm myself, imagining tank top guys' extra 25 cents going toward my future beach towel. Yeah, okay, I'll take 3 of the, he squinted, bringing the brochure closer. Lemonades. I handed him the pen through the small opening in the door. When he'd written down his order, he waved to us and closed his front door. Good job, my dad said. I nodded. Ready for the next one? After you, he said, waving me onward. I wandered up to the next store hesitantly, and the next, and after I'd gathered a good amount of sales under my belt, I began to feel this strange buzz throughout my body. This capitalism thing was pretty cool. Unlike the other girls in my troupe, I couldn't get the bulk of my sales from my parents' workplaces. This was due to the fact that A, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and B, my dad worked for the government, and apparently it's the government's policy to crush little girls' dreams of winning free beach towels and pewter statues and not allow their employees to sell anything. Not even American-made Girl Scout cookies. I shook my head when my father told me the bad news. No wonder everyone gets giddy about communism these days. The government is such a poopy head when it comes to economics, I told him. In my mind, we smoked our cigars and sipped on our whiskey on the back porch. My dad coughed in response, having not quite adapted to our new meeting setup. I pretended not to notice. He could be so embarrassing at times. Guess we're gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way. And so I had to become my own one-woman selling machine. My hideous haircut, giant glasses, and crooked teeth became my most valuable weapons. I stunned suburban Ohioans left and right with my looks when I knocked on their doors. No one could tell if they were buying Girl Scout cookies or supporting a charity for children with rare facial disorders. Here, one elderly lady said, handing me $1. Go ahead and take that, you poor girl. Troop 1801 thanks you for your contribution, I said, handing the $1 off to my dad, who'd become my intern in the span of 1 block. Daddy, I said to my intern, we need to finish this stretch by sundown. Do you think you could pick up the pace? Elaine, we've canvassed the entire neighborhood, he said. He was slightly huffing. Workers these days, I muttered, waving my hands in the air and stomping off to the next house. Now it was my turn to deliver the pep talks. Come on, we can go a little further, can't we? Our pen froze, my dad said. He wagged the pen in front of my face. The ink in the pen has frozen. Because it's so cold outside, let's just finish up tomorrow. Money never sleeps, I cried, running up the driveway of another house, slipping across the ice that coated the entire pavement. Selling the cookies let me have an insight into my neighborhood I had been denied previously. Everyone in my neck of the woods knew their neighbors by the name of the dogs that lived in each place. For instance, my family was only known as Ginny's house. Rocket lived a block away, Murphy was in the cul-de-sac a few houses down, and we lived next door to Buttercup, the fat Labrador. Going door to door let me snoop around and figure out who these mysterious people were beyond their dog identities. There were some weird people, like Tank Top Guy. There was some interesting older people, like Toothless Man, who insisted on buying cookies from me for 3 years in a row even though he couldn't eat them. And then there were the overzealous ones, people who had Girl Scout cookie fever. My first encounter with this breed of neighbor happened during the first round of selling. It was near the end of our capitalist trek. My intern and I were frozen, cold, and starting to bicker at one another. I thought I'd have more by now, I complained, recounting how many cookies I'd sold that day. I think you've done well, he said. This isn't even counting the Kroger and mall sales that you'll have by the end of the week. Whatever, let's get this over with. I rang the doorbell through my pink mitten. A blonde, middle-aged woman answered the door. Her eyes instantly widened when she saw my brownie vest over my winter coat. Are you selling Girl Scout cookies? She said. I squinted at her. This could go either way. Smiling, I answered, yes. She swung the door open and ushered us through the door. Oh my goodness, this is so exciting. We haven't had a Girl Scout here in years. Please come in, it's so cold outside. You were such a trooper. We were whisked into her kitchen before we could even consider if she was a serial killer. I shared a glance with intern. He shrugged at me. Between the two of us, our only weapons to capture any evildoers consisted of a pair of keys, a few pins from my vest, and our shoelaces. I cursed myself for not paying better attention during the knot-tying badge. I might have been able to fashion a noose. I'm sorry for the mess, the woman said, snatching the brochure out of my hand. I've had this cold, one of those lingering colds for about a week now. I've been watching all of Anne of Green Gables. Have you ever seen it? I loved it as a child. I smiled and shrugged. They were going to be my last moments on Earth, and I was going to die in my stupid brownie vest. I smiled so that the tears of horror couldn't escape. I loved the Girl Scouts when I was in it. Oh, I remember how hard it was to sell cookies. Here, I'll take one of each. Or, no, wait. The woman started aggressively writing in numbers into every single column. My eyes shone green as she handed back the brochure, and I saw she'd bought 22 boxes. Thank you, I said. Here, she said, grabbing a bag. My father makes soft pretzels. Take some with you. Oh, thanks, I said. I checked with my intern to make sure it was safe for me to take the food. He shrugged. I guess it was fine by him if there were glass shards hidden in the dough, but I suppose I couldn't have expected more from an employee who worked for free. We eventually escaped her intense kindness, something us Midwesterners don't stomach well in large doses, and walked briskly home, shoving the pretzels into our faces. The cookie season ended with group sales with our entire troop at places like Kroger and the Dayton Mall. This was where I was forced to wear the stupidest costume known to mankind. Thin Mint Elaine sort of looked more like Giant Turd Elaine. Green specks freckled the costume, I suppose to insinuate that it was a mint cookie, even though the actual product had no such coloration. It was a solid chocolate cookie. I walked around as the other girls got to sit and share gossip, most likely trash-talking Giant Turd Elaine. People pointed at me, and when I asked if they wanted to buy any Girl Scout cookies, they laughed and said they weren't interested. I thought the Kroger stint would be the last of my cookie acting days, but I was wrong. When we hit up the Dayton Mall, the kiosk we had rented included a do-si-do costume. Pulling off a circular peanut butter sandwich cookie is a hard thing to do, and I figured if it was paired with my ugly duckling features, I could spin some sales the same way I had in my neighborhood. Unfortunately, two ugly things put together does not, in fact, make something extra adorable. It is quite the opposite of that. Children hid behind their parents' legs when they saw me. On a bathroom break, I screamed in the mirror, thinking it was Rush Limbaugh staring back at me, coated in clumpy peanut butter. I flipped the costume inside out so that the eyes, yes, the cookie suit was anthropomorphic, were no longer gazing directly into people's souls. I used to wonder why I was forced to go through such a painful experience when it finally dawned on me. I understood my troop leader's decision for me to be the one to wear the cookie costume. I mean, what's funnier than making a child with social anxiety wear a ridiculous outfit that scars her and makes her feel like a social pariah as she begs for money from strangers? Even I laugh when I tell that story to my therapist. The social discomfort made me do strange things when I was a do-si-do. I tried to reenact the dance I was named after, grabbing my fellow scouts' arms and swinging them round and round. I'm a do-si-do, I'd sing. Come do-si-do with me. Would you like to buy some Girl Scout cookies? Going from a Thin Mint to a do-si-do was like going from brunette to blonde. I was having so much more fun. What was even better was that if I threw up from my social anxiety, it would blend in perfectly with my dimpled, murky brown costume. I couldn't have asked for a better memory to wake me up occasionally in the middle of the night a decade later. That's what my therapist and I have concluded on the matter anyway. At the end of the season, I was one of the top 5 sellers in my troupe. The best moment was when I discovered that I would indeed be winning the beach towel, a handy thing to have in Southern Ohio. When I came home from my meeting, I ran up to my intern and patted him on the back. "Good job, sport. We did it. We made the cut," I said. My dad smiled. "I told you that you would." "Whatever, get back to making my lunch for tomorrow," I said. The end. Yes, there were cookie costumes that they always gave at the kiosks. I don't know why they wanted to put children through that, but kind of the same way that you'll see people dressed as mascots outside of certain insurance buildings or whatever to get people to buy things. They did that to children. That was an essay, and you can actually read the whole thing on my Patreon if you want to. I'll have it up by this publication. That's patreon.com/AngusIT, by the way. I also post other things I've written in the past, so that was just a flavor of what past Elaine has gone through. It's interesting. I would love to go back through these though and be like, oh, well, I was bipolar, bitch. What now? I guess an overall thought, having gone through that, reliving those memories, there's a couple layers there. One is just to be really proud of how far I've come from being the anxious child who tried to sell Girl Scout cookies and got way too excited about it and basically wore herself down. But, I pushed that comfort zone. I went beyond it. And I got happiness. I got a beach towel that I have to this day. I have not been able to get rid of it. But now I live by beaches, so I guess it worked out. Manifest destiny. That's not what that means. Another way, too, it's just to be like, yeah, I used to write. I can write like that. I can write better than that, There's some good vibes where I get to look back on something that obviously is a big positive, but for me these days when I look back at it, I'm like, look, I just wasted my potential. This was it. This was the beginning of something I could have kept pursuing, and then I just stopped. But I have to pause and be like, yeah, well, you basically had a mental health shit show going on and job situations and stuff. It's okay. So in a way, it was kind of nice to read that and be like, hey, okay, I still got that. I can do it. And again, like I said, I'm in the writing mode again, so I feel pretty good. But yes, thank you for listening to my Girl Scout essay. I do have more I have written about other situations, so if you want to hear more, let me know. I might not do all dramatic readings of them. Again, on my Patreon, that's where I post these fun little writings. I also have an old story that I never finished. I was in 3rd grade and it was called Corgi World. And I'm not opposed to reading it and then giving myself 5 hours to write a completed version of what baby Elaine had attempted to do with Corgi World. Again, just fun things. You let me know. But thank you so much for listening. Yeah, join my Patreon. I have 3 tiers, a lowest starting at $1. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at AngusIT. That's Angus like the cow, I like the body part, and T like the drink. If you want show notes and beyond, you can go to www.angusit.com. Or if you want to reach out to me directly regarding working with me, you can go to angusit@gmail.com. I hope that you stumble across some of your old writings and you get a little kick from it. You no longer see it as oh, this was the peak of me. You're like, hey, that was pretty awesome. And it boosted me into this other thing. My writing helped me become a really good podcaster. And in turn, being a good podcaster has helped me become a better writer. They all just are bouncing off each other. So I hope you have something like that. And you do not have a wall of dead dreams. It's a wall of accomplishments. And I'm talking about you. I'm not talking about me, okay? And with that, I will talk to you next Wednesday. Bye, Heifers.